I'm Owen Bigland. This is the Inside Edge video blog. Okay, we're going to talk a bunch of topics today. Interest rates, real estate, a little bit about the economy, where I see the market going. Essentially, the gist of this blog, though, is going to be why over the last 35 or 40 years, my opinion and my advice I've doled out to you guys on this blog for the last 12 or 13 is never changed. I am incredibly bullish long-term, which is the only way to look at things, on Vancouver real estate. I have been for 38 years. I've owned you guys know, I've talked the talk and walked the walk in this blog. Very few realtors out there have the time in the market that I've got, have the real estate portfolio I've got, and had the mentors I've had over the years, including my father, who's been in Vancouver real estate, started in Kitsilano in the the early 1950s. So I've seen I've seen a lot of stuff in Vancouver real estate. I've also been an equity investor, investing in the stock market, coming up to 25 years now. So I can speak from experience on this. It's not theory, it's practical stuff. But I did that blog a few weeks ago on interest rates and how, it's unprecedented. 7 interest rate hikes, 7, never been seen before. 400 basis points, or a 4% increase, and we've got another one coming here, and maybe another 1 or 2 more. Who knows? Let's see where it goes later this year. I think we're nearing the end of this tightening schedule, and we're probably going to pause here pretty quick. So I think the worst is definitely over, but we're in uncharted territory here. But I had a ton of comments on there. I had 3,000 views on that video in the first 24 hours. And I knew this was going to happen. A few people chimed in saying, "Oh, and geez, all of a sudden you're very negative on Vancouver real estate. What's going on? 2 years ago, you said that prices never go down," which is totally wrong. I called the guy out on that. You guys know, if you've been watching this blog for the last 10 or 12 years that I've been doing this, or read my book, my message never changes here. It's never changed. It's never changed in 40 years in Vancouver real estate. 4 decades. I started, under my dad, under my father. I was born into a real estate family, bought my first condo 35 years ago, and I still own it today. My message has never changed. You buy in the short term. Real estate stock prices go up and down, and don't try and guess where markets are going. In 1 to 2 years, 3 year, 4 year, who knows where the Vancouver real estate market's going to go? Who knows where the S&P 500 is? But what I've given you guys my golden rules over and over again. In the short term, prices go up and down. In the long term, the golden rule I always hold out for real estate is 8 to 10 years minimum, a holding period. If you're going to buy a house, keep it for at least 8 to 10 years, or preferably a lot longer, and you're going to do incredible. Because in the short term, real estate or the stock market are based on sentiment. It's a voting machine, as Warren Buffett calls it. In the long term, though, it's a weighing machine. That's where the fundamentals really come into play on companies in real estate in Vancouver. So in the short term, anything can happen. How many blogs have I done? Not trying to time markets. Markets go up and down. But in the long term, you're going to make boatloads of money if you buy high quality Vancouver real estate, or buy a high quality company like Macdonald's or Pepsi or Johnson & Johnson or Visa, and just keep the damn thing. You're going to make boatloads of capital gains on it. So my message has never changed. Anyone that thinks that 2 years ago, I don't know what you're talking about, saying that Vancouver prices will never go down. Of course they will. Last year, prices were probably off an average of about 5%. Not very much. Condos were barely scathed. We'll see what 2023 brings. But as I've always pointed out, you want to focus on long-term only, whether that's investing for retirement or buying your home or investing in real estate. That's all that should matter to you guys. Next topic here, because that's why I thought I'd better do another video here to just reiterate that I have not turned bearish on Vancouver real estate whatsoever. As a matter of fact, I'm more bullish than I've ever been. I've never wavered in 35 years. You buy a home today, as long as you hire a good realtor, buy a high quality home, whether that's a studio condo in Yaletown, or a 2-bedroom out on SkyTrain in New West, or a detached home in Kerrisdale, or a detached home in Mount Pleasant, whatever, a duplex. You buy a quality home, don't overpay for it, leave yourself a buffer for increased mortgage rates, although that was more the fact years ago. I was telling you guys for the last 4 or 5 years, enjoy these low interest rates because they've got nowhere to go but up. Now they're up. But leave yourself a buffer financially. Preferably, these days, maybe lock it in for 1, 2 to 5 years so you know it's secure for at least that period of time. And then hang on to the home, and you will do incredible over the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years. You'll look back on it 30 years from now and say, I wish I would have bought 2 of those homes. But in the short term, as I've often said here, all bets are off. But let me give you my catalysts. They haven't changed that much. There's a few new wrinkles in here with immigration now on why I am so bullish on Vancouver real estate. You buy a quality home here, keep it, you are going to do incredible. A number of things I just want to point out. People think that real estate goes up and down and we're headed for a crash. These guys have been saying that for 30 years. Keep in mind something, the fundamentals of real estate, folks. Real estate will go up generally. It will keep pace with inflation, not in lockstep. There's always delays there because in the short term, it's based off things like interest rates, which we're going through right now, the employment numbers, the economy, and just overall market sentiment, supply and demand. Those will dictate what the prices do from 1 to 5 years, let's say. But over 10, 15, 20, 30 years, why I always say here that you're going to make boatloads of capital gain is because real estate will keep pace at the very least. Supply and demand and interest rates and all these things have huge impacts too, but they will keep pace with inflation because the cost to build a house, the rebar, the concrete, the wood, the glass continues to go up, and it will always go up. So just like the stock market, companies can adjust and will increase their earnings. They'll increase their prices on the products they sell to inflation, not in lockstep. So always keep that in mind. That's the basic fundamentals of something like real estate or owning a good quality company like a Johnson & Johnson. Generally, the prices keep pace over time with inflation at the very least, plus and then some, depending on things like supply and demand and interest rates and all that stuff. Take me an hour to go through that with you guys. So keep that in mind long term. But here's some catalysts I'll go through some of them on why I am so bullish on Vancouver real estate. First one is, of course, some people have been commenting on my YouTube channel here. Tell us about, Owen, what's your comments? And I brushed on it a bit on immigration numbers in Canada. Yeah, immigration in Canada, we're going to be bringing in 1.5 million new Canadians here over the next 3 or 4 years. This is how it's going to be going moving forward. We're a huge country that has a low population. And we need to bring in young people, skilled workers, families from all over the world to keep this country going. We need more people. And that is the mandate of the government. I think something like 40 to 50,000 arrivals are going to be coming in every year here into the lower mainland. Most will be settled in and around Vancouver for the foreseeable future. Now, of course, there's a lot of criticism with this immigration number because, of course, we don't have enough housing to support what we have now, and now we're going to be bringing in another 1.5 million new Canadians. Where are they going to live? Yeah, you're right. But, of course, governments have blown that big time. I mean, just have a look. I don't want to get too unwielding here, but, David Eby, who was our housing minister for many years, now our premier, I mean, the NDP has taxed everything to death. They've run out of areas to try and curb demand because that was, remember, starting 5 years ago, the NDP said the reason you haven't been able to buy a house is because of flippers, speculators, money launderers, all that good stuff, which was a lie. And we're going to tax everything to death to curb demand when they should have been working the supply side decades ago. Now they've finished taxing everything. There's nothing left. There's nothing left for the NDP to tax as far as real estate. They put in every single restriction, including, I'll talk about down the road here, this new cooling off period, which is even dumber than I ever imagined. So now they've done a 180 and now we've got to work supply, Mr. Eby is saying. Where were you 5 or 6 years ago? Now, of course, you've missed the window. Now interest rates have spiked way up. The economy, we're heading for a recession here in Canada. It might be mild. We'll have to see where it goes. Builders are on the sidelines and because they don't trust you, Mr. Eby, or the NDP. So we're not building anything now. So we are so far behind the 8 ball on that. So there is pretty much the only catalyst you need long term. If you own a home here in Vancouver, or you're like me and own a portfolio of rental properties, then hey, this is music to my ears. This is why rents have spiked massively here the last 3 or 4 years. This is why, long term, you buy a quality condo, buy a duplex, whatever, as long as it's a good home in downtown Vancouver or Mount Pleasant or Kitts or perhaps Burnaby or Richmond, and keep it. Because we've got 105 million new Canadians coming in, 50,000 coming into the Lower Mainland here every year for the foreseeable future. Plus, we've still got lots of Chinese investors coming in through the investment program. They're going to start kicking back in here again too. So that's a pretty damn good catalyst long term for buying a house here and hanging on to it. We have very little available buildable land here in the Lower Mainland. How many blogs have I done on that? We are restricted here a great deal. We're not Phoenix, Arizona, where you can build out forever in any direction. We've got water, mountains, agricultural land reserve. Then we've got a very restrictive government, both local, provincial, Canada-wide. Tough to get mortgages, tough to get mortgage financing for projects for developers, and just an unfriendly business environment overall. It's always been a trickle-in supply here, as I've said, on building new homes, and it's going to get worse. Add to that 1.5 million people coming into this country. We need them. We have to. We have no choice. Aging demographic. We need new people, and we need to create new jobs and everything else to keep this economy going. So that's a pretty damn good catalyst right there, is the immigration. Interest rates. I think the worst is over on that front, as I said in that last video. I think we are probably going to see a pause sooner than people think. I think maybe one more quarter rate hike after this. They'll probably pause. Inflation is definitely coming down. Keep in mind that for every quarter point or even a half point interest rate hike, it takes about 18 months for that to get felt through the economy and bring down inflation. So here we did 7 hikes last year. We should probably take a little bit of a pause, I think. Let that settle through. The numbers don't lie. Inflation is coming down. It's going to take a while to get to that 2%. But people have asked me, when do you think interest rates will come down? I don't know. Probably sooner than most people think. I could see a pause here later this spring, and then perhaps later into this year, we could maybe see a pivot and some reduction, small, or early 2024. I'll tell you what I did, and I take the advice of my mortgage people. I just renewed one of my investment unit mortgages. And I tell you, it was at 3.1%. I just renewed a 2-year fixed at 6.5, so substantially higher. Not a big problem for me. It's not a big mortgage, and all that interest is deductible for me, 100%. So it's not going to make any difference. But I locked in on the advice I've got the opinion of a couple mortgage guys that are real pros. They kind of think, lock in for 2 years, Owen, plug your nose. You were at 3.1, now you're at 6.5. But hey, in 2 years, when it renews, hopefully it'll be a little better. I think it probably will be. How much better? I don't know. Maybe it's at 6, maybe at 5.75. But that's probably the way a lot of people are thinking. Final few things, the catalyst again on why I'm so bullish on real estate. If you have to own your principal residence here, it's the Tina effect. There is no alternative. If you're a young person watching my blog here, you're saving for the down payment, keep at it. As a matter of fact, I would tell you to try and do whatever you can to accelerate that. Stop going to Canucks games for a little while. No bars and restaurants. You got to make the sacrifices. I did 35 years ago, and it's not going to get any easier. I'll do more blogs on this. Government of Canada here, they want to tighten up the mortgage regulations even tougher. So for you young people, I've done how many blogs on this, on how difficult it is to get into homeownership in Canada. They speak with forked tongue, these politicians, especially a guy like David Eby. They'll tell you that they want to get you into home ownership. We want to make homes more affordable, but they go about it the wrong way. They tax everything to death instead of working the supply side. But the other thing is, they make it incredibly difficult for a young person to get into home ownership. And they've been tightening the screws on this for the last decade. The stress test was a huge one, adding 2% to the declared rate that you have to qualify. So a young buyer now, has to qualify at about 8.5%, Right now with the stress test, a lot of people are saying, why do we still have the stress test? It was fine when variables were at 1.2, but now that a variable's at 5.5, maybe they should lighten up on that a little bit. I agree. But they want to tighten the screws even more. I've been reading some articles lately. So if you're a young person, this should be your goal to get into homeownership, because guess what? It's not going to get any easier. And then, the government wanting to do more tightening on qualifying, again, for a guy like me and my well-heeled investor clients, it's music to our ears. This just keeps making the rich richer, because it forces these young people, first-time buyers and families, into that renter treadmill for life in some cases. They'd love to be able to buy a house, but I got to qualify at 8.5%, even though the rate they're going to get is more like 6.5%. So it's not going to get any easier. The final things here, why you should own. There's the alternative is to rent at, and we know what's gone on with rent prices. They've gone through the roof. It's after you put your down payment funds in, the cost of home ownership versus renting is very little. There's not much difference. Meanwhile, you're creating equity two ways on the home ownership. You're paying down the principal every month, and over the long term, not every year, but over long periods of time, you're going to get incredible amounts of capital gain on that. In 25 years, the house will be paid for and probably worth $1 million or $2 million. Who knows? Depends on what you buy. Plus, you get the only true tax shelter we get in this country, and that's the principal residence exemption. It's minted more multimillionaires than all other sources combined. So for those reasons, I wanted to put this video out, because I think people weren't understanding what I was saying about that interest rate hike. Yes, these interest rate hikes are tough, and yes, there are going to be some people in trouble, like I pointed out on that blog. There's no signs of panic right now, at least in my main market, the Vancouver market. I'll do more blogs as we move into the spring and keep you guys right up to date, because I don't sugarcoat anything here. I don't have any biases. What I always point out, unlike a lot of people I see on Twitter and some of these negative websites that are calling for a crash, their biases are showing. Mine, I just give you guys the straight goods, both good and bad, but I always tell you to stay focused on the long term. In the short term, it's going to be volatile, up, down, people calling for a crash. Ignore all of it. Buy your principal residence, take advantage of all those things I just listed, and enjoy the home. Review it in 10, 15, 20 years and you'll be very pleased. But we'll see where this market goes. But overall, I have never wavered in 35 to 40 years here. I am incredibly bullish long-term on Vancouver real estate, or Burnaby real estate, or Richmond real estate if you buy the right home. Victoria, whatever. Just like I'm incredibly bullish long-term on the stock markets, the TSX, the S&P, the NASDAQ. There's going to be volatility. Last year was a bad year. Use those bad years to try and buy shares at a better price. That's how I look at it. It's an opportunity. When I pulled the trigger on 100 shares of Macdonald's, I could care less what it does 6 months or a year from now. I'll review it in 10 or 15 years. And I've held Macdonald's for coming up to 17 years now on some of my first purchases of Macdonald's. Final thing I'll just leave you guys with, a final one here on why I am so bullish long term in a country like Canada, and especially a city like Vancouver. Listen, Vancouver is and always will be one of the most desirable cities in Canada by far. I know I'll get people say, hey, I live in such and such and it's better. Maybe it is for you. For my lifestyle, I could live anywhere I want. I could live anywhere I want in North America. Vancouver is it for me because it's just a perfect balance of what I want in my life. I love riding my bike on the seawall. You can ski, you can golf. Mild winters. We've got the best winters anywhere in Canada here. So for me, this is the place to be. And it's not any coincidence that our real estate is the most expensive. That's how real estate works. The really desirable cities tend to have expensive real estate. The not so desirable cities will always have less expensive real estate. That's just the way it works. But, Vancouver isn't going to lose its luster. I've done blogs how Vancouver is like a supermodel. We were born like Cindy Crawford. We've got the looks. There's that old saying, some cities get by on their looks. Other cities have to work for a living. A city that would have to work for a living is Detroit. Not the prettiest city, working class, blue collar city. Vancouver, on the other hand, is a destination city and always will be. That's why I tell people, if you've got the budget, get a piece of downtown Vancouver while the getting's good. Because everything from this point on is ultra luxury only at $2,000 a square foot. I'm still selling condos every week at $1,100, $1,150 a square foot. That's going to look pretty good in 20 years. But Vancouver is like the supermodel. This is where people want to live. In Canada, probably the best city. In North America, easily one of the top 5 or 6 cities in North America, and one of the best cities in the world. That's not going to change. I know there's people that say Vancouver's not the same, and it's taken a turn for the worse. Well, we had an idiotic mayor that we booted out, and yeah, it's like Warren Buffett says, even these greatest companies in the world, a ham sandwich could run these things and they'd still be okay. Just as long as the ham sandwich doesn't say CEO for too long. McDonald's or Johnson & Johnson or Visa or Home Depot or Costco would be one of those. Vancouver, we had a few bad years here with Kennedy Stewart. We booted him out, thankfully. We've got a new mayor, but it takes a lot of effort to really screw up a city like Vancouver, and it's going to get back off. It gets better every year, in my opinion. Sure, COVID brought down a lot of cities. We had a lot of trouble with not just Vancouver, but with every city. So that's never going to lose its luster, Vancouver. If anything, it gets better and better every year. Final thing I'll leave you with is a little off topic, but you guys know I'm always listening to podcasts. I'm reading all the time, books and everything. I came across an interesting podcast, an interesting guy on the Joe Rogan podcast. I don't listen to Joe Rogan all that much, but a bunch of stuff came through on my Twitter of a guest that he had. His name was Peter Zeihan, Zeihan. And he was on the Rogan podcast. A lot of people were talking about him in the news. He was mentioned in the Wall Street Journal. So this guy just wrote a book. He's an author. He's a geopolitical strategist with a lot of experience. He's got a book out called The End of the World is Just Beginning, Mapping the Collapse of Globalization. So he was on the Rogan show for about 2 hours. You might want to give it a listen to. I listened to it on Spotify. He's got a lot of interesting stuff to say. Pretty smart guy. He works for the U.S. government. He consults. Kind of put into context what's going on with the invasion of Ukraine and why Russia did it. I never understood it until I listened to him. It makes a lot of sense. Russia had no choice. They needed to expand. Also talks a lot about China and how that country, is probably in some trouble right now. But it went on for about an hour and a half. Pretty negative stuff. Talked about South America and economies and devaluing currency and populations that are getting old and a lot of negative stuff. Rogan at the end of the day was saying, geez, man, I'm going to need to get a drink. This is depressing stuff. What about, United States and North America? What do you see for that? And everything then, he goes, I'm glad you asked me. Let's finish it on a positive note. He sees incredible prosperity for North America. Specifically mentioned Canada, United States, and Mexico, of course. He says we are the one area that has got a bright future for a number of reasons. Clean drinking water, stable political system, fresh air. We grow all our own food. We're self-sufficient. We're energy sufficient. This is where people want to come to North America, Canada, US, and Mexico, he says. If you're living in those 3 countries, things are looking bright. So, I don't know, you guys listen to it yourself, see what you think. I don't know, I'm sure some of this stuff that he's talking about here is probably a pipe dream. Other things are probably pretty accurate. But again, it just solidifies. If you're living in Canada, living in Vancouver, United States, we've got 2 of the best countries to live in here. And over long periods of time, that is going to be positive. It's going to be a catalyst for higher real estate prices going forward. It will. So I'm incredibly bullish, never wavered on that, as you guys know. And I'll do more blogs as we go through here. And I'm going to keep you guys up to date on the interest rate hikes. I've got lots of new listings here. Let's see where the market's at here. It's too early to tell, and we'll take it from there. I'm Owen Bigland. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.